We've just been watching attorneys giving their opening statements in the manslaughter trial against Alec Baldwin. Prosecutor Erlinda Johnson laid out the argument that Baldwin is to blame for the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins during rehearsal for the film Rust, saying Baldwin violated the cardinal rules of firearm safety. Among other issues, she says Baldwin did not do a safety check with the armorer, who has already been convicted. Meanwhile, defense attorney Alec Spiro called Hutchins' death an unspeakable tragedy, but said Baldwin committed no crime. He says the most critical issue in this case is how a real bullet got on a movie set, how that bullet entered a prop gun, and why it was handed to the actor with the announcement, "Cold gun," and that Alec Baldwin had nothing to do with any of that. ABC's Jacqueline Lee joins me now, along with ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer for more. Jacqueline, what's it like in the courtroom today?
So everyone is listening very closely to the opening arguments. When it comes to the jury, they were listening very closely. And as we had mentioned before, it's majority women, and they are older women. There's also two younger men. So, when Alec Spiro was speaking, he was trying to illustrate the atmosphere that day that Alec Baldwin was experiencing as the lead actor. And whenever you're acting on a set, there's some improv. You're trying to bring this movie to life, right? So he pulled up this video where the jury was able to see a scene from that day, and he's trying to show that Alec Baldwin is focusing on how to make this the best movie possible, whereas he's relying on multiple people behind the scenes to say, hey, this is a cold gun. There's not supposed to be any live bullets in it. So he's trying to show to the jury that his client is innocent. Diane.
Brian, prosecutors say Baldwin ignored cardinal safety rules. Now the defense is saying there are no cardinal safety rules because everything on the set is supposed to be fake, especially the bullets. How much is going to come down to this idea of there are cardinal rules that all actors need to follow when they're handling a gun? And how do you go about proving how cemented those rules are?
I think we got to look to where those rules are listed, whether or not Alec Baldwin has access to it, whether or not he's learned about them or was informed about them. I'm assuming the answer is yes. And we have to look to wherever those rules are printed. And the reason why that's so important is because that's how you prove, more than anything, recklessness. That there are standards and guidelines that someone is supposed to operate with. And if they diverge from that in a careless or negligent way, that rises to the level of recklessness. Now, if these are guidelines that you're supposed to closely follow, and he did, and there's nothing specifically saying don't pull the trigger on the set for an actor, or actors don't have to check, or it doesn't say that actors do have to check, then that helps the defense. But if there are cardinal rules, as the prosecution is arguing, that helps them. So we kind of just have to look to the rules. There
was an interesting part in the defense's opening argument that really stuck out to me, and it was when Alec Spiro brought out the video of a different moment in the rehearsal, and he's sort of explaining a play-by-play of what's happening and asking the jury to put themselves in the position of Alec Baldwin, saying he's not acting as Alec Baldwin now. He is Harlan Rust. He is an outlaw. He is handling the gun as an outlaw would. He is doing the job of an actor, and then showing Baldwin on set following these close directions of how to hold a gun, how to point it, how to whip it out, and so on. Why is that so important for him to try to really paint this full picture of what it's like to be an actor in that moment?
So in a sense, the defense is playing defense and offense, but also setting a trap for the prosecution, because they know the prosecution has already played their hand of saying, we're going to show you videos of Alec Baldwin operating recklessly with this gun. And so you must look at him being reckless here. So therefore, he must have been reckless at the time that Helena Hutchins died. The defense is saying, OK, you want to play those videos? Go for it. He's acting. He's not operating in a sense of being very careful because he's supposed to be an outlaw. He's supposed to be someone that operates recklessly because we, the viewers, want that in our movies. If we didn't want that, we wouldn't have the Wild Wild West. It'd be called the very Calm East or something different. I don't know. And so the more the prosecution tries to play into this recklessness of the video, the defense gets to come up and say, you see, we told you, he's acting. He's supposed to be like this, but he does operate carefully. The issue is the bullet, not how he handles our gun or his acting.
Jacqueline, we also heard the defense emphasize the term cold gun. How much is that going to come to play in this trial?
I mean, ultimately, you have to think about what did Alec Baldwin know and when. What the defense was really trying to point out is that there were multiple layers of safety checks that clearly failed. Not only did Hannah Gutierrez, the armorer, not only was she in charge of checking the gun, but then also you had the first assistant director, David Halls, also check the bullets. So the defense was saying an actor can't necessarily tell the difference between a live bullet, a fake bullet, a blank, that kind of thing. And that is the role of these people behind the scenes. So if he is standing there on set, they're rehearsing, they're filming a scene, and the people responsible for saying, hey, this gun is safe, this is a cold gun, he's going to trust that. They also pointed out, the prosecution was saying, well, Alec Baldwin was reckless and he was negligent because he didn't do his own safety check. But the whole argument of the defense is saying, as an actor, he's not responsible for that. It's not outlined in SAG-AFTRA's rules that an actor is responsible for these safety checks. That is why they have multiple people in place prior to that scene so that the actor can rely on them.
And Brian, one of the last things we heard from Alex Spiro was, you won't see, you won't see, you won't see. He's outlining all the witnesses that the prosecution does not plan to call. What do you make of that strategy? So
as a defense attorney, you can prove that your client is not guilty, both based on the evidence that is presented that you find in cross-examination, but also in the lack of evidence. And so when you're talking about what rules an actor should follow, one would think that you would have another actor up there or an expert in being an actor saying, this is what we do, this is what we don't do. And I think that lack of evidence that we're expecting in this case helps the defense to say, you're not going to get this. You probably need it, but you're not going to get it. So how can you prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt?
Jacqueline, that said, one of the things the prosecution pointed out is that the crew had walked off the set that very day. And she says one of the reasons they walked off the set was citing concerns over gun safety. How damning is that for Baldwin?
It's very damning because the whole point is the prosecution's trying to argue is that he jumped over safety concerns and he was being negligent and reckless. Now, something that they pointed out, the prosecution, is they're going to be bringing the manufacturer of the gun to the courthouse to serve as testimony. And if you think about it, the whole crux of Alec Baldwin's argument, as he said in the 2021 interview with George Stephanopoulos, is he said, I never pulled the trigger. And so the prosecution's trying to argue that is physically impossible because the gun worked the entire time. So you must have pulled the trigger for that live bullet to have shot out and killed Helena Hutchins. We're also going to hear from crew members who are going to be saying there were some inexperienced people on set, one of whom was Hannah Gutierrez, the armorer. And so the prosecution is going to be bringing these witnesses forward to try to prove that Alec Baldwin, as the lead actor, knew that there were issues on set. People walked out, there were safety concerns, and yet this incident still happened.
Brian, last focus seems to be on the word foreseeable. That is part of what you would need to find in a conviction in this case. How hard is it going to be for the prosecution to prove that Alec Baldwin acted in a way where this tragedy was foreseeable to him? Well,
in a case where the prosecution, the jury, law enforcement, no one can tell us how a live round got onto the set, yet alone into that firearm. How does it become foreseeable? It becomes very difficult. And the one thing I want to touch on as well is interesting in the defense, they almost gave up on the argument of Alec Baldwin did or didn't pull the trigger. They said even if he did, the foreseeability of that bullet in the gun is the ultimate issue. He could be pulling the trigger all he wants. He could have done it mistakenly. But if he can't foresee that a live round is in that gun on that set, even within a 1,000-yard radius of the place, how is it foreseeable that he's going to expect that someone gets shot by a live round?
All right, we'll see how the prosecution intends to prove that. Jacqueline Lee, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you both.